Hello and welcome to this week's awesome, full of chalked up topics episode of Unscripted with Mike and Jeffrey. It's great to be here with you today. We got a lot on deck, obviously, as you can tell from the thumbnail beside us and image on screen. Um, Obviously, with the Tom Brady topic, there's not a lot to dive into because he won't even start on the team until 24. So that will obviously be one of our shorter topics today, but we hope you still sit back and enjoy with us. And yeah, let's talk some football. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I can't wait to talk about the alternative football leagues on screen, the XFL and the USFL. Looking forward to both. Obviously, the XFL sooner, but with Tom Brady, it's really interesting, man. And you're gonna be able to watch him on TV in a different way, in a little over a year. So it's gonna be, a lot different not seeing him on the field, but we'll be able to, hear one of the all-time greats, if not the greatest player to ever, play quarterback in the NFL. To break the game down, it's gonna be awesome. Can't wait to
For
get into
sure.
it.
Oh yeah. So that being said, let's go ahead and let's talk about Brady. So I don't know about you, but I don't know how I feel about this. I mean, he's a decent person. There's things out there floating around. It's like, what do you believe? But
Mm-hmm.
the man is football smart. He knows his football. He knows how to break down plays. Do you think him calling a game would be similar to the way Tony Romo calls the game, or do you think he'll end up falling under the category of like everyone else? Because I think to a point that I had made it in a previous stream at some point, Tony Romo, to people's points, are calling and predicting what the play is going to be while calling the game before the play even develops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, how do you think it's going to come out for him?
Well, I mean, like you said, I mean, when you're a player like Tom Brady, who has basically gone down as the best quarterback of all time, especially with the Super Bowl wins, just his stats and the longevity of his career. Um, you're going to have people that like him and people that don't. You have players that weren't as successful, like in their career, and people will, you know, like them better, for, who they are because they're not as, like prevalent or whatever. They're not like annoying to like, especially if they're like not a fan of the team or, you can't really be as cocky of a person when you're not as good of a player. I mean, some people still are, but then people really don't like them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that basically with Tom Brady, I mean, it's the fact that a lot of people who do not like Tom Brady probably won't like him as a commentator. I mean, just if you don't like the person, you don't want to see them, commentate a game. So, I mean, for me, I watched Tom Brady, and when he was younger, he was, fairly cocky when he won games. But as he got older, he mellowed out. I, don't really have, that big of a, you know, thing with Tom Brady where I'm not a fan of him. I mean, I respect what he's done, and he, gave us a lot of enjoyment watching, great football in the NFL. So, I mean, I don't really have any issues with him. But to your point about the commentating style, I think what would really benefit Tom Brady is if he is very likable when he's commentating and he breaks the game down at a very high level, like
Mm-hmm.
Tony Romo does, as you pointed out. And if he's able to do that, then I think that a lot more people will warm up to him as a commentator, and probably would help if not every 2 seconds Fox is showing, highlights of Tom Brady's career or talking about all of his Super Bowl wins for people that aren't a big fan of Tom Brady, then it probably would help if they just more talk about the game that they're currently, analyzing or whatever, commentating about. So, I mean, overall, I think that Tom Brady being, a Fox commentator, I don't really have any issues with it. I kind of wish, Greg Olsen wasn't booted, from the top spot so quickly. Like maybe it was like a warm-up period where Brady could work his way into it, but he's immediately being given the top spot, which I understand. It's Tom Brady, the name appeal and everything. I mean, it makes sense. Like I get it. You just kind of wish there was a little bit of a hierarchy where you can move up. But besides that, I mean, I can say I'm looking forward to it. I want to see what he's going to do. I want to see how it's going to be presented. But I just hope that he does a really good job and is, analyzing the game and being very likable. So, in the future, because he has a 10-year contract, that it will be enjoyable over the 10-year period. And instead of it being that he does it for a little while and then people it's wore out its welcome.
Right. I think to your point, yes, they should have figured out a way to maybe ease Tom into it, instead of just throw him into the fire and make him on the number one team on Fox. I mean, there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with having 3 analysts and having, a non-quarterback commentator and a quarterback commentator with a Gus Johnson type who's like just there to, give emphasis on the, oh my gosh, holy crap, he threw a bomb. What did you think of the bomb, Tom? Yeah, I loved how the receiver ran the bootleg route and brought in the curl.
Thanks for being here, One Scoop, John.
Yes, thank you, One Scoop.
I will say, though, to your point, if you notice, and obviously you watch it because it's on regular TV on CBS, but Jay Wright, they've done that with him. He's the 3rd analyst. They've brought him in, and they still have the 2 guys that were doing it before, and Jay Wright's in the middle. So that could have been done, like you said.
Yes, it is. We will get there.
It's crazy.
I know, it's crazy.
But yeah, I mean, I think that they could have put Greg Olsen in between, or someone else. I mean, not to just take him out of there, but I mean, like I said, I completely understand why Tom Brady is getting the top spot. I get it. Like, I understand the name appeal. I mean, some people, when they have that draw, they're going to automatically be boosted higher. But I do kind of wish, like you said, that they would have the 3 analysts. I mean, maybe it's tougher for football. I don't know. But in basketball, the way they had it set up, you see the 3 guys on CBS, and it works really well. They all share the time, and and they bring up Jay Wright's past of him coaching, but it's not all the time. And it just, you mention it, and then the other 2 guys, do more of the analysts of the game. It just, to me, it blends really well.
Yes. I mean, to your point, like the NBA even does it with NBA on TNT with Reggie Miller and the other 2. So, I mean, it can be done. It's just a matter of the network and the league wanting to do it. I mean, yes, Tom Brady, to your point, the big name appeal. And I think to a degree, we'll see more of a different side of Tom that we don't usually see. So, like, for example, I never cared for Tony Romo. Why? I never thought he was that good of a quarterback.
And that's the other thing. A lot of people didn't like Romo just because he wasn't that good, per se. But with Tom Brady, it's because he's too good.
Yeah, because he never won like that wild card game where he botched the kick, the hold for the kick against Seattle, and was like that short from getting the touchdown or the 2-point conversion. They should have won that game, realistically. It's things like that. Like Mark Sanchez, okay, he's more known for the butt fumble, and he was worse than Romo. in my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, he got to 2 AFC championship games in a row, but it's the Jets, and the AFC was kind of wishy-washy at the time. My point is, like, I never cared for Romo, but I love watching Romo broadcasts because of the way he dissects the game.
Yes.
If we can get that with Tom, I think people are eventually going to come around. And like, okay, I didn't like Tom as a player because he won all the time. It's my reason. I don't care if it's a bad reason, but he's a good person or a decent person. And I just like the way he calls the game. There can be a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it like I said, kind of to your point, off of your point, you have to be likable and you have to break the game down at a high level. And if Tom Brady does that, then over time, I think a lot of people that aren't fans of Tom Brady will end up liking Tom Brady if it's only just for his commentating, and that's it. The on the field stuff, they'll still have all the memories that they didn't like, but as a commentator, people will enjoy listening to him break games down. And I think that that's what Tom Brady's got to aim for. I think that's what Fox is aiming for. And Tom Brady, when you listen to him talk, I mean, he's very, you know, he's very intelligent. He talks very well, and so I think he's going to do a really good job. It's just about, breaking the game down at a high level and, doing it in a way that the majority of people like. Because I mean, obviously, no matter how much, someone, a majority of people like a commentator. Not everyone's going to like a commentator. You look at even Gus Johnson. There's some people that don't like Gus Johnson. I do.
I do.
I've always liked listening to him. Some people don't like Gus Johnson because, he makes a mistake every now and then, or he's too amplified. But I think it adds to the enjoyment of the game, especially when he's next to a commentator that's more of the breakdown, like Joel Klatt in football. He's I'm breaking it down, more flat, where Gus Johnson's oh man, I'm losing my voice hollering because there's a big touchdown. Like, that is a good contrast. And Tom Brady, he's just got to, be himself and do a really good job breaking the game down. And I think if he does, then I think that a lot of people will warm up to him. Like I said, even if it's just for commentating.
Yeah. I almost wonder if to kind of get him in the groove and help him figure out his style and everything, so to speak, I almost wonder if we see Fox plaster him almost everywhere they can during the preseason for him to call as many games as possible in the 3-week span of preseason.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. I mean, because you want to, build up, his basically him being, doing the commentating and people, starting to, like Tom Brady as a commentator, get warmed up to him. I just think that Tom Brady, I mean, he's going to do a good job, I think, no matter what. I think I don't think he would be doing this if he wasn't capable of it. I mean, he's, like I said, you listen to him talk, he's, he's an intelligent guy. So he's going to do a really good job. He wouldn't be doing this if he wasn't. So I just think that as long as he does a really good job, I think the majority of people will, enjoy his commentating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to benefit Fox and it's going to benefit him. So, that's a hefty contract.
And I mean, I don't know if people realize this, but, his contract is with Fox. It's not with NFL on Fox.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if, too, we start to get, okay, Tom is comfortable on TV. Hey, Tom, here, in part of your contract, we need you to do something else outside of NFL. All right, well, I'll go do, a couple episodes on The Masked Singer on Fox, or let me go try to do something with, the one chef that I can't stand, Gordon Ramsay, and be on one of his shows for something. So we could see him randomly pop up on other Fox products because contract, yes, it's with NFL broadcasting, but at a finer standpoint or in a broader standpoint, it's with Fox itself. So,
well, I mean, that could go one or two ways. I mean, just say that happens where, he is on the Masked Singer or whatever, or, I
know,
or,
right?
or some other show, like, Gordon Ramsay's, cooking stuff. I mean, if it's any of that, then I think that could go one or two ways. I mean, people could be like, wow, Tom Brady's doing something besides football, but it could also be where people are like, oh no, here's Tom Brady again. Because I mean, it's almost like with the Rob Gronkowski stuff. Now that he's out of football, he's on everything. He's in commercials everywhere, cameos everywhere. And some people really like it, but some people are like, oh no, it's Gronk again. It's kind of like, it could go one or two ways. You can, wring the well dry, or, or people enjoy the fact he's doing, other things besides football. I just think that, you're never going to make everyone like you when you're famous. That's
Right.
just
I mean,
and your approach to things aren't always going to be liked by people.
Right. And I think, like if he has to show his face, for example, Gordon Ramsay or something other than football on Fox, I think it helps with the exposure, helps him with being comfortable in other things and being on screen. But to your point, if it's a lot to do with showing his face, it could be oversaturation.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like I started with Masked Singer because why? Dude, Rudy Giuliani was on Masked Singer at one point. And he ended up being on for a couple of episodes. Why? Because you're covered up and your voice is slightly altered, I think, so to make it harder for the judges to guess who is in the costume.
Oh yeah, I mean, if they didn't do that, then I mean, everyone would probably know who it is. Especially if it's someone with a really recognizable voice. I mean, for sure. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I just think that it could be awesome to have Tom Brady do other things, but I think that they need to be a little weary of going overboard. Where he does too much and then people don't really like it that much. I do agree with you, One Scoot John, Gordon Ramsay. I mean, some of the stuff he says is hilarious.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting with Tom Brady. I'm looking forward to seeing how it works out in 2024 beyond, and seeing how he is as a commentator and potentially other things. But the reaction from people is going to be interesting to see if the majority of people like Brady doing all those things or not. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Let's talk about the next thing. We got XFL getting ready to start up. And in this segment, we want to look at the season as a whole. Does the XFL finally finish the season? If they finish the season, do they have a champion? Who will the champion be? I think the format for the playoffs is like the USFL was last year. 4 teams, 2 games, and then a championship game. So first, let's start with the overview of the season. How do you think it's going to go? What matchups through the 10 weeks are you excited for? And then once we both discuss that, let's talk about predictions like, okay, who's going to make the playoffs? Who's going to be in the championship? Who's going to win the championship?
Now, obviously, all of those questions, are going to be so tough to answer because we haven't seen these teams before, play. Like these specific players playing for these specific teams this year. So it's going to be really tough to pick. I mean, I've roughly looked, done an outline of all the rosters. I made a video on it yesterday, XFL Preview. you guys want to check it out. But I mean, basically, we're not going to really have a good idea what these teams look like until they play. And now to your question about will the league finish a season, I mean, I think they would have finished 2020, but you know what happened. Everyone knows what happened in 2020. It was a very unfortunate, and the season got canceled. And Vince McMahon, basically gave up on it because he didn't want to take any more losses, which I understand. But it really hurt the league. But as long as something like that does not happen this year, and where, anything's getting shut down again or whatever, and you've got Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson owning this thing. I don't think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson he's going to do everything he possibly can to make this work. Plus you got this league on ESPN and ABC. It's not like the Alliance League where it was on like CBS Sports Network a lot and FS1, where a lot of people don't have those channels. I mean, the XFL is doing a great job with putting this on ABC and ESPN. I mean, the USFL is pretty good with Fox and NBC too. I mean, that there's a lot of people would argue ESPN's better, but I don't really see a problem with Fox and NBC as well. Everybody has, the antenna channels or whatever you want to call them. But I think that as long as nothing crazy happens, this league will make it this year. It's going to finish the season. It's going to have a champion. And I foresee a second season because the USFL is in year 2. And the thing is with the USFL, last season, they had all the games being played in Birmingham, one location. This league, every single team has their own building, which is really important because you're going to have the fans from the local places, going to all the stadiums. Because that was the whole problem of the USFL. I'm like, it was really good to have it in one location because you're only having to pay money for one spot. You're not having to pay for all those stadiums, all that, the travel costs. That was great. All the players were at that one spot. But the issue was that you were only making money from fans in one game whenever Birmingham played. If Birmingham wasn't playing, there was no one there. So with the XFL, you're going to have fans for, filling up the stadiums at all these places. And I think more and more people are warming up to these alternative leagues now because people want to watch stuff. It's not the 80s and 90s where it's like people, when the off season was over, just didn't really care. I mean, they might have, missed sports, but I mean, they did things. I mean, people still do things, but people love just checking stuff out, watching TV, watching sports. If they're on the road, they can look at it on their phone. Social media is big, and that's what's helping these leagues as well. So just this day and age, I think it benefits these leagues more. And plus, there's so many players now that want to play, and there's so many players that are good enough to potentially play in the NFL, but there's not enough roster spots. Players are playing longer now in the NFL. So there's just a lot of room for these leagues to make it. And so I think the XFL is going to make it as long as nothing happens that shuts the season down. I think that there's some pretty, well-known players. I mean, A.J. McCarron's in this league. He's a 32-year-old quarterback that you would think, well, he's not in the NFL anymore. He's just done. No, he's playing in this league. I mean, it's insane. I mean, I know obviously he's the biggest name. I mean, it's not like, oh, wow, there's a million names. But you even have Paxton Lynch. I know everybody remembers him as the infamous first-round draft pick to the Broncos. It didn't work out. But
DeAndre Francois,
he was elite at Florida State, and then he got hurt, and then he transferred to Hampton and was never heard from again until now. So, I mean, you just look at it. And Hans Ward's a coach. Hans Ward is a coach for a new team, the Brahmas, the San Antonio Brahmas. So, I mean, you just think about it. There's just a lot of cool stuff going on with this league. There's a lot of good coaches. I mean, you've got Wade Phillips. I mean, he was coaching the NFL for a long time. His dad was a legendary head coach. So, I mean, there's good coaches. There's good players. The Rock owns the league. I mean, there's a lot of appeal for this league. It's on TV. So I think that the league's going to make it, and I think it's going to be awesome to watch. That's just my overall take of the league.
Now, I mean, to your point about league survival, I think it can survive. It sucks that it's had to take 3 iterations of the league, but only 2 iterations were taken seriously. the second go around with Vince,
Mm-hmm.
and I think with Rock iteration, it's being taken seriously.
Yes.
They've been plastered all over Sports Center and ESPN lately for obvious reasons, as you stated. With the games being broadcasted on ABC and ESPN, and ESPN having ownership of ABC.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of good teams in here. I mean, Jordan Teamu
Yes.
is another name that we just didn't hear about. And then he was in the first iteration with AJ McCarron's St. Louis Battlehawks. It falls apart because of the obvious reasons as you stated. And right now, everything is perfect. Knock on wood. My table's wood, so knock on wood. That, to your point, nothing drastic like that happens this time around. But now he's with the awesome DC Defenders and replaced 12 gauge Cardale Jones over there, who is in the IFL. So good luck, 12 gauge over there. Both leagues, as we'll kind of get to, have good exposure. And there's a lot of eyes on the XFL this time around, because if you don't make it through a year completely, you don't make it really off the ground this time, does the XFL fold for good? And I think that if it doesn't make it this time, with having The Rock behind it, I don't think it's a league that can never make it. I mean, to a lot of people's point, the LA Kiss, or whoever it was, not the LA Kiss, the LA team from the first go around of the XFL is still your defending XFL champions. And they've been your defending champions since 2001.
It's crazy.
Because for whatever reason, the XFL is not having success.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of there's a few repeats, and it's because of having 10 teams in the league, which is fine. USFL, as we'll get to in a bit, runs into the same problem. But there's still good matchups. Like, I think, Arlington and San Antonio could be a threat in the West. Look out for St. Louis for sure. St. Louis is good. Even though, to your point, AJ McCarron is 32, he's still a good quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that has to be obvious, because if he wasn't still good at 32, he wouldn't be on the team.
No.
DC is a threat from the East.
Mm-hmm.
Houston from the West. I mean, I think, it's going to be tight more from, I think, the Western half than it will be from the Eastern half.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not completely sure what the alignment looks like where the cutoff is to make it East and West, but it'd be interesting.
I agree with you when you said about if the league don't make it this time, then I think it's done. I agree with that. I don't think it's going to fail, because, again, it's got The Rock, man. I mean, he's not going to let this fail. I really doubt that, as long as nothing catastrophic happens, and it's on ABC, ESPN. It's people, you're going to watch it, man. And plus, think about it.
Mm-hmm.
They started the league less than a week after the Super Bowl. I think that is huge as well, because fan interest in football hasn't gone away. Like, you just saw the Super Bowl, and it's almost like this is just an extension to that. in a weird way.
Mhm.
It's like, this is the next week of football, even if it's not the NFL. It's just the next week. I mean, I'm not saying the USFL or the Alliance, of American football when they did their league in 2019, starting later. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that, because if people know a league's going on, and with social media and everything, people are going to know it exists. They can turn it on if they want to. But I do think this helps having it right after the Super Bowl. And then with this league, if this league does really well, this is going to wrap up right around when the USFL begins, kind of roughly. I think there might be a little bit of it'll be on at the same time.
There's like a 2-week
Yeah.
regular season overlap. So
Yes.
when you
Full
factor in the playoffs, it's about a month of overlap.
But I think that it's just going to be a good transition over, and people, tune in. So I think that having it on ABC, ESPN right after the Super Bowl, I think people are going to watch it. To your list of teams that you see as a threat, I think an underrated team is the Orlando Guardians. I think their roster is really good. They got really good, defensive player Nick Coe, out of Auburn, and Cody Latimer. I mean, he was a really good player out of Indiana. I mean, that guy was a second-round draft pick. Yeah, he's a little older, but he's still only like 29, and I mean, he's big. So really, the key for them is gonna be the quarterback position. If they can get Paxton Lynch or DeAndre Francois figured out who's gonna be good at quarterback, and that person plays really well, that team could be good. But I mean, like you said, you go up and down these teams. There are talented players. I mean,
Josh Gordon's back. He's on one of these teams.
I mean, you've got Cole McDonald. Cole McDonald at Hawaii lit it up. I mean, he was throwing for 500 yards and 5-6 touchdowns a game when he was at Hawaii. I don't know if he'll be the starting quarterback or if it'll be Caleb Ellaby out of Western Michigan. And like you said, the DC defenders. I mean, you've got Eric Dungy, who was really good at Syracuse in 2019 when Syracuse beat Clemson and they had like a 10-3 year. You've got De'Aaron King, who was really good at Houston, but then he went to Miami and got hurt a lot and didn't really do anything else there. Then Jordan Ta'amu, he played in the USFL. He was at Ole Miss. I mean, these teams have really good players that are notable enough. Kyle Sloter played in the USFL. He's with the Arlington Renegades. I mean, you just look at all these quarterbacks. Jack Cohn with the San Antonio Brahmas. He was at Notre Dame in Wisconsin. You've got obviously A.J. McCarron with the Bowhawks, and then Luis Perez for the Vipers. He played in the USFL. I just think that overall, you just look at the roster, and that's just the quarterback spot. I just think that there's a lot of really solid players, and you've got notable head coaches. You've got cool names. I mean, the teams are cool. It's more spread out, too. Like, I like the fact with the XFL, besides the fact that you have all of the location, the teams have their own stadium, unlike the USFL. Even though the USFL is branching to 4 this time, it still isn't all 8, which I wish it was, but this league is, and I like how it's very spread out. Like, I like how there's a team in Seattle. I mean, that you don't have that with the USFL. There's nothing west of Texas in the USFL, but in this league, you've got the Vegas Vipers. You have the Seattle Sea Dragons. There's 2 out west teams. It's more spread out. Even though obviously you do have, the Texas teams, but still outside of that, it's very spread out. I just think the league's constructed really well. And as long as the level of play is high enough for people to want to watch, I think the league will be just fine. I like everything about it.
I mean, to your point, I don't think with The Rock behind it, I don't think he'll allow for the league to fail. If it somehow starts to fail, do we maybe see a possible? Of course, you would have to get rid of some teams, I think, from the XFL side. But do we possibly see, if XFL starts to come down, do we possibly see a XFL USFL merger?
That would be a last ditch effort or a last gasp for both these leagues, because I think the USFL would only agree to that if it was struggling. And if the XFL is struggling, the USFL is probably struggling too. I think that, I mean, the with these leagues, I mean, the problem is that people have to want to watch, these games badly enough. And I mean, for people like me and you, it's football. We're going to turn it on if we're at home and it's on TV. We're going to turn it on. But for some people, they want to watch better football. I mean, there are some people that will never watch this because it's not high level football. I mean, you see like football fans in college, they'll turn on Saturday, on college football on ESPN or, ABC or whatever, and they're going to watch Alabama and Tennessee, and they're going to watch Ohio State, Michigan, when they play, or Ohio State, Penn State. They're not going to watch Indiana versus Northwestern, or they're not going to watch Vanderbilt versus Missouri. But some people will. We will, if we can watch it, or whatever. But some people want to watch better football. And yes, these two leagues, it's definitely a downgrade from the NFL. These players are players that aren't in the NFL. But I still think that there's enough, name appeal with who's in the league playing for the XFL and the coaches. And with how ESPN, and Sports Center and all that are promoting this league like crazy, I do think that there's enough there for this league to make it, at least this season. I mean, in the future, 3 or 4 years down the line, if both these leagues are still going, I don't know. Who knows? But I think for this year, I think it's going to make it for sure. So you asked also as well who we think is going to, win, the championship. Like I said, that's almost impossible. I could literally have an argument for all these teams. I really like the McCarron team. I do. I think Mateo Duran at running back is great as well. He was out of Duke. So I really like, that team. And I like the Orlando Guardians if they can get the quarterback situation fixed with whoever's going to be. So the St. Louis Battlehawks, I like the Guardians. And, I'm probably pretty high on Arlington and DC as well. So one of those 4 teams. I could see them all, though. But, yeah, so you said we're also picking the week 1 games as well?
Yeah, so the week 1 slate looks like this. So we got on Saturday to kick it all off. We got the Vegas Vipers at the Arlington Renegades. And after that, we have the Orlando Guardians and the Houston Roughnecks.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how many people are watching on FX instead of ESPN. But, yeah, so you got the Vegas Vipers at Arlington. So, so you're going to have your first look, at, Kyle Sloter. I'm assuming he's going to be the starting quarterback. Drew Plitt, he was solid in college, but I would think it's Kyle Sloter. I don't know much about Kevin Anderson. And then you've got for the Vegas Vipers, you've got Brett Hundley, Jalen McClellan, Luis Perez.
I think it's going to be Hundley, in my opinion.
Hundley, yeah. That's a tough one. I'd probably go with Arlington on that one by 7. We're going to get a much better feel for these teams once they play a few games and we can actually see who's good. But I'll probably take Arlington like 24 or 17.
All right. I would say I probably would go Vegas Vipers. 28-24. To your point, yes, it's probably going to be close no matter what. Because, week 1 jitters, figuring things out, finally playing televised live action. So, it's going to be that way across the board. To your point, we probably won't have a full feel for everyone until week 3.
Our records are probably going to be bad on these until like week 4, and we're gonna like see some 0-3 teams. Like, oh, we're not picking them; they're 0-3 for a reason. So the next game, we got Orlando Guardians at Houston Roughnecks. I really, really like Orlando. I think they got a really good team. It's just the quarterback slot that needs to be figured out. So could be wrong, but I'm gonna take Orlando. 21-14 over Houston.
Oh, this one's tough for me because in the first, not the first, technically, if we want to be technical, the second iteration of this league, the 2020 version, I really liked Houston with PJ Walker. Obviously, he's not there this time. He's with
Panthers.
Yeah, he's with your awesome Carolina Panthers. And I still like them to make the playoffs. I don't know the layout for the divisions because you can almost guess. The only outlier is with having the DC Defenders, which are awesome. But I think, Houston has the potential to be a playoff team. But oh my gosh, man, I really like DeAndre Francois. I think we're probably going to have a Paxton Lynch play one half, Francois play the other half. I think they may start the game with Paxton and finish the game with Francois. If that's the case, I think that when Francois comes in, he's going to take it over, and Orlando could create separation from Houston. I think Orlando will win this game. Potentially, you could see it being a higher, more separation, but I'm going to say 24-14 Orlando.
I mean, I'm with you. I mean, it's literally, to me, it's going to come down to, with Orlando, you got to get the quarterback situation figured out. And if DeAndre Francois can play like he did at Florida State, now I know it feels a lifetime ago. Jimbo Fisher was coaching Florida State still, but still, that guy was really good. And they've got a really good team. A lot of notable players. I'm just, seeing, good things out of that roster. But if the quarterback situation is not figured out for Orlando, then they could be bad. But I think their upside is high. So I'm going to pick them. But to your point, if DeAndre Francois does not come into the game, very much, and Paxton Lynch is struggling, they can lose. But if they bring DeAndre Francois in, I think they can win. If it's at least a whole half.
Yes. So that being said, on Sunday, to start off, we got the St. Louis Battlehawks, led by Mr. A.J. McCarron, going up against the San Antonio Brahmas in San Antonio, led by Jack Cohn. And we got the Seattle Sea Dragons at the Jordan Ta'amu-led DC Defenders. That first game for me, I'll let you go first, but I'll say this. That first game for me, the St. Louis-San Antonio game, is so tough because I like Jack Cohn. For Will's sake, I like Jack Cohn. He's a good quarterback. I do admit he's good. But, man, there's something about St. Louis and finally having a professional football team back in St. Louis. And I love
the XFL.
A.J. McCarron. A.J. McCarron, when he played at Bama, didn't like Bama. But as a player, an individual player, A.J. McCarron is so good.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is obviously Hines Ward's first, coaching game here, with the Brahmas. I think Jack Cohn, there's going to be, a little bit of a rough patch first game coaching. I think you have the experience with McCarron. He hasn't played in a while, but I think he has the, experience here. I'm going to go with St. Louis in this one, 27-21.
Oh, gosh. Yes. Man, this one, like I said, this one is so tough for me. I'm sure we'll see some rust from McCarron because I'm sure it's been a while. To your point, is there going to be rough patches with Cohn and Hines Ward? Hines Ward's first ever coaching job. Overall, just going to be interesting. So I think you're close, but I'm going to go. Oh my Gosh. You know what? I think they play each other at least twice this year. So for this one, I'm going to go St. Louis 28-24. Probably have to go with a split in that series. So the next one is basically the exact same game that we got to kick off the entire 2020 version. Mm-hmm. They just slightly changed Seattle's name. But other than that, it's the same exact matchup. You go from the Seattle Dragons versus at DC Defenders to Seattle Sea Dragons at DC Defenders. So what do you think about this one?
Yeah, Seattle's the only team that I don't really like. The quarterback position is not like flashing at me. I mean, you've got Ben DiNucci, Steven Montez. I mean, they're both quality players, but just nothing like jumps off the page like a Jordan Ta'amu or a Paxton Lynch even, or AJ McCarron with like the name. I think that any of those quarterbacks could be pretty solid. I mean, like you said, they got Josh Gordon at receivers, so I mean they got some players that are pretty solid. But you just look at the DC Defenders. I just think that you look at their roster, quarterback situation. You've got three potentially really good quarterbacks here. I mean, I don't even know who should be the starting quarterback. Jordan Tommy, Derek King, Eric Dungy. I could literally see any of those three playing really quality football for DC because all of them had their moments in college. All of them did. I mean, Eric Dungy was great at Syracuse that one year. Derek King, especially when he was at Houston before he got hurt, was really, really good. And Jordan Thomas had his moments. So I don't even know who's going to be the quarterback, but I think that any of those three could be really good. Puka Williams, Abram Smith at running back, that's solid. And then you've got really quality defensive players as well. Reggie North. I just see a lot with DC. So I'm going to go with DC over Seattle, 24-21.
I didn't realize Derek King is on DC. To your point, Ben DiNucci is the only, like, realistically, if you look at all the quarterbacks, he's like the only average quarterback in this league as far as the starters or potential starters. As I stated earlier, Jordan was in this league in the second iteration in 2020. He was with St. Louis. So he does have that experience. Granted, it's a whole different team. It's different rosters across the board. I just really like DC a lot. Just overall. I know, yes, I'm sad that 12 Gauge is not playing for DC anymore, but he's on to better pastures where he can truly sling it around. I think because overall as a season, for Seattle to have success, it's going to come down to how good can Josh Gordon and the weapons that Seattle has make Ben DiNucci look.
Yes.
So I find this one to be the only one to be the closest thing to a blowout because you're having to find that rhythm between Ben DiNucci and the rest of the weapons. So I think DC runs away with this one. I'm going to say 24-7.
I can definitely see that. I mean, I did keep the scores relatively close because it's week one and it's just so tough to know, how these teams are going to play. And usually there's like a rough patch because it's your first game. So you just feel like no one's really going to be clicking on all cylinders. But like you said, if I could see a blowout, it could be that game. Another thing, I know we're picking the games, but I think a really interesting thing about the XFL is as well, is how I did say that I think it's really good that the league is coming on right after the Super Bowl for people, that are we'll have football, and it's right after, so it's essentially the next week. It will be interesting though with college basketball still on, because the USFL doesn't have that. There's no college basketball. I wonder how, like, a lot of people who transition from football over to basketball around this time because of the fact like it's over, how that's gonna conflict each other, because like these games are on Saturday and there's basketball on. Because I mean, like at 4:00 on ESPN is Kansas Baylor basketball, and you've got this game still going on ABC with Vegas and Arlington. That's going to be interesting to see how that clashes. I don't think the 8:30 game will be as big a deal because obviously there's not as many high quality matchups late at night in basketball, but that early game is going to be interesting. I think that it's going to perform well because it's the first game and a lot of people will be interested in it, but still there's going to be college basketball that it's going to be interfering with. So that's going to be interesting to see how it does, with basketball versus this league.
I mean, yes, to your point, and that's why I wish all the games could be broadcasted on ABC. Because, yes, I'm calling 3 out of the 4 games this coming weekend. The only outlier for me is Orlando, Houston, that I'm not going to call. But I usually don't have access to cable. This weekend I will, and that's why I'm going to be able to call Seattle, DC. But that's where, and still to your point, yes, it'll still clash with college basketball for the antenna folk like myself. But I think that's where the ratings will stay okay-ish. Where it won't really be impacted because, I mean, would you rather watch a football game or, for example, if this would have been on, if Seattle, San Antonio would have been on it at 1:00 on ABC last weekend, would you rather watch a football game, an equivalent to like a semi-pro football game, or would you rather watch on CBS one average and one in the dumpster fire team, Michigan State, Ohio State basketball game? I'd rather watch the equivalent to a semi-pro football game.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's completely different. That's why I did bring up with Vegas and Arlington that at the same time you're going to have Kansas Baylor. That's different because you've got a top 10 college basketball matchup going up against the XFL's first game. That's interesting. Now, to your point, I mean, CBS, it's really bad with the Big Ten this year because like Ohio State in general is a team that a lot of people thought was going to be a really good Big Ten team this year. So they've put Ohio State on CBS several times this year when they shouldn't have been. I think they play Purdue coming up on CBS, and more likely that's not going to be close. I think that's why, to me, and I know this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, I still believe that college basketball needs to be like college football, where you schedule the games 2 weeks in advance and you schedule the games based on how the teams are performing. So if a team's performing better, like when Indiana was doing well in 2020, they were putting the games on ABC because they were playing well instead of it being normally on Big Ten Network. In college basketball, they schedule the games and put all of the slots and the TV network designations in the preseason. To me, that is an error. You need to put the best games possible on those days, and even move them around if you have to. I mean, like, you could put a better game from the Big Ten on CBS than Michigan State, Ohio State.
Yeah.
I mean, even Indiana, Michigan, that wasn't, maybe the highest quality matchup ever because Michigan was 14-10. It ended up being a good game, and it probably would have had more appeal because it was Indiana, a top 25 team on the road, than Michigan State, Ohio State. That's my issue with basketball scheduling, is that they do it in the preseason, and a lot of teams that end up not being very good are still getting all the great slots because of the fact they had that in the preseason. Whereas like Kansas State was on ESPN Plus because people thought K-State was going to be bad, like always, but they were really good. And then you had Kentucky Ole Miss on ESPN, and then Kansas State was on ESPN Plus, a top 10 matchup at the time. That's just a problem with college basketball. So to your point, basically to rail all that back in, the point is that the XFL is going to be fine because a lot of people will watch this over a horrible game in college basketball that's on TV at the same time. It's only going to impact it when you have a Vegas Vipers, Arlington Renegades versus Kansas Baylor. That's when it's going to be possibly affected. Only
Yeah,
great games.
Yeah, and to your point, I think the only way that you could save the ratings factor would be like just pray to God that Kansas or Baylor creates separation from the other to the point it's like, okay, there's enough separation here. Let me go flip over to ABC because holy crap, Vegas and Arlington are in a neck and neck and it's coming down to the wire.
Yes.
Whereas, you're starting to lean towards, okay, it's obvious that this team or this team is going to win for Kansas Baylor. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what you want to hope and pray for, because until that happens, you're probably going to see like the type of person that I am, where it's like, okay, you've got the big basketball game that we have to pay attention to for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. And you've got the XFL game that we want to pay attention to because we love football. And so I'm the type of person, okay, flip it to that game first, see how it kind of starts, pay attention to the ticker at the bottom. If it says Kansas Baylor's a good game, all right, flip it over there, wait for a commercial, flip it back to the football game, and just keep doing that.
Yes. And a lot of people do that. I mean, again, some people don't even like basketball, so they'll watch this anyway. But there are the people that watch both. And, I mean, people flip-flop more than ever, especially with these streaming services, because, I mean, you can easily just go to the next game. It's so easy. And some people will watch a game on TV and then watch the other game on their phone. People do that too. So, I mean, there's so much technology these days where it's not as big a deal as it used to be. But it is something to watch for. But I don't really think, for the people that love football, the XFL, they're going to watch that instead. It's just for the people that like both.
Yes. Mm-hmm. For sure.
But I'm really looking forward to the XFL. And like One Scoop John said close to an hour ago, I can't believe it's only in 3 days. I mean, it's insane. 3 days away, we're going to have football.
More football.
A lot of players that we remember watching in college. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. It's not just QBs, it's tight ends and receivers and defensive linemen. But, wow, I remember that guy way back when. So it's cool.
I mean, to your point, like I was saying earlier with like Tom Brady, I never liked watching him play, but I'm excited to watch him announce the games. Mm-hmm. I have been wishy-washy when McCarron was in college, but I really want to see this guy come out and win an XFL championship.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's awesome for any of these guys, man, because, I mean, again, a lot of these guys probably never thought they were going to play again. And then you get an opportunity to play in the XFL or the USFL or the CFL or any of these other leagues that exist now. And, I mean, it's a great opportunity to potentially, like Kevontae Turpin, to get in the NFL from the USFL, how he played really well. I mean, you have a chance to do that. And it's a great opportunity. And it's like I said in my video again on the XFL preview yesterday, the thing is that it's great for us to be able to watch these players play, when the NFL is over, but it's also great for them because it gives them, another opportunity to play the sport they love to play and are talented enough to play, but just unfortunately outside the NFL.
Yeah. So that is one thing I couldn't figure out when I wanted to mention it to you. That is one thing that I wanted to bring up, that the other league that we're about to dive into kind of sort of has a like minor league baseball style contract with the NFL. And I'm not stating this like when I'm messed up in my AAF USFL expansion video, because I don't remember if I read this or not, but I vaguely remember either reading it in an article or someone stating this maybe as an opinion. But there's something out there. Don't remember, like I said, don't remember which way it is, but there's something out there of possibly the XFL trying to get a contract where it's like a minor league for the CFL, because that's the other way that these leagues are going to survive. And that's the difference too, is in my opinion, and I guess we could talk about this more when we switch over to USFL, the marketing.
Yes.
Yes, the Super Bowl was on Fox, and that's why we saw more USFL ads on during the Super Bowl, and we didn't see any for XFL because of the cross branding between Fox and ESPN. But to a lot of people's point, I know you don't personally because you don't have much time really anymore, but like if you listen to or watch any of these YouTube channels or podcasts when they're like USFL specific, Fox is all in on the USFL. Fox wants the USFL to succeed. The trick is, where's ESPN on the XFL? Does ESPN want the XFL to succeed? To be able to broadcast more football, I would assume that they do. But
yes.
Are they going to handle it properly? Are they going to do it right? Because the format that Fox is taking, they're already talking about, for USFL, they're already talking about expansion either next year or 2025. If we get out of season 1 for XFL, do we slowly start to hear, expansion, talking about who do we want to bring in?
I would hope that they would expand, because it would give more players opportunity and there'd be more matchups. That'd be really cool.
And the other thing too is, like, yes, you and I both, I think, agree. We would love to see some of the AAF teams come back. For the AAF, my favorites were always Orlando Apollos, Arizona Hotshots, and then at the end, I started to like, the San Antonio Commanders, which they would have to go somewhere else because you got the Brahmas in San Antonio already, and the San Diego Fleet also.
Yeah, and you mentioned Orlando, so you already have Orlando Guardians in the XFL, so you'd have to. If it would be the USFL, it'd be a little different, because I think if I recall, the USFL got rid of the Orlando team, and now it's Memphis Showboats. It was a Orlando team, but they got rid of it.
The Tampa Bay Bandits.
Oh, Tampa Bay. Yeah, that's it. Tampa Bay. I knew it was Florida. Sorry about that. But
you're good.
But yeah, the thing is that, to your point, it's how these networks are marketing this, and it basically that these are developmental leagues, because you have the G League for the NBA. And the G League is basically the developmental league. It would be cool to have a league like an XFL or USFL for basketball, but there really hasn't been, because you have the G League. I don't know if there ever will be, but these leagues kind of serve what the G League is. And plus, football, there's just so many players playing it. Like in basketball, people are just, content with, they're going to go to Europe. They're going to go to China to play basketball. Some other country to play basketball. Whereas here it's like, these leagues are for you. I kind of wish basketball would do the same, so a lot of these players could play here as well. But you had like NFL Europe for a while, in like the 2000s and stuff, where it was kind of like the developmental league, but the NFL they don't do that anymore. And then like now it's like the CFL, the XFL, and the USFL are like the developmental leagues for all this stuff, which is just really interesting that the basketball don't have that, because it's just the G League and Europe.
Right. Speaking of developmental leagues, the one that more people are excited about, they're more pumped about, which is crazy because it don't even start till like April.
Yeah.
So to your point, there's been two big things that come out of the off season for USFL. You got Tampa Bay going on hiatus and bringing in the Memphis Showboats. Actually, there's technically three. So you got that. You got the Maulers changing their colors. That was pretty big because you go from the orange and purple, which was weird, and I have no idea why or how they came up with that color scheme, to the traditional everyone that plays in Pittsburgh minus the Flyers. No, that's Philly. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. Everyone that plays in Pittsburgh uses the same color scheme, black and gold. So they finally donned the color scheme.
I like the purple. I mean, the orange was interesting, but I thought it was cool. I like purple as a color.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it'd been cool if they could have found a way to incorporate like yellow and purple, but I guess it wouldn't have worked. I mean, you do have that with LSU and ECU in college, so it would have worked. It looks cool, but I guess they didn't want to be like, repetitive. And to your point, Pittsburgh has that color scheme, but I did like the purple.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I did like the color scheme.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was the first iteration of the Pittsburgh Maulers, so obviously, you know, it'll always have a special place in our hearts for us that really care about this league and want to see it succeed.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got that. You've got the addition of the showboats, freaking awesome, and you have the location expansion. To your point, we have the hubs now. You've got the Philly Stars and the Michigan Panthers playing in Detroit, which for some reason I kept thinking that it was Pittsburgh in Michigan.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that, but since you brought it up real quick, I don't understand that because it's like Philadelphia is farther than Pittsburgh, and yet Philadelphia is going all the way to Michigan. It's funny. Be their home team. It's like, okay.
Then you got Pittsburgh, yes, and New Jersey, playing in Canton. So I'll probably be spending a lot of time in Canton this summer. I don't know about that, you know, with prices and everything. I'm gonna at least try to go a couple times, see the teams I actually want to see. Then you got the Showboats and the Houston Gamblers in Memphis. And you've got the defending USFL champion Birmingham Stallions and the New Orleans Breakers in the Birmingham hub.
Yeah, I like this better than the everyone playing in Birmingham idea. I like this better, but I still wish they had have gone to 8, locations where everyone was playing, had their own stadium. I do specifically for like the teams that it benefits the most still, like Birmingham. It helps them more than New Orleans because it's in Birmingham, and Houston, and Memphis. It's in Memphis. It's going to help Memphis more. Pittsburgh and New Jersey playing in Ohio is going to help Pittsburgh more, and Michigan and Philly is going to help Michigan more because it's being in Michigan. I still wish that they had have gone to 8 locations, and maybe they will eventually. I know they're doing it for cost cutting. I get it. And they knew that the one location wasn't going to work. Yes, it was very cheap to do because you only had to pay for one spot and everyone played in that one spot. So it was very cost effective, but you only had fans for one team. And
I mean, to your point, yes, mostly. Sorry to cut you off. Yes, mostly, but I mean, Tampa Bay is not that far from Birmingham to a degree. New Orleans is like a 4 or 5 hour drive. So I mean, with those two specifically, you could get some of the fan base to show out. It was easiest was when he had it all in Birmingham. The easiest fan base to bring down was Birmingham, obviously, then New Orleans, then Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Other than that, yeah, your point stands for the rest of them, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, roughly, there was no one else there. I mean, to your point, if you want to get really technical about it, there was still some from the others. But for the most part, there was no one else there. And that wasn't making them money. So this is better to have the hubs or whatever. This is better because you have, I mean, at least technically all of the teams are within driving distance, but I still wish that there was all 8. But I think eventually it will happen. Like if this, does really well, and plus when they expand, they might go to all the teams having their own location, or they might still have the hubs where like still 2 teams or where it's the closest do it. I don't know how they're going to do that, but this is a step in the right direction from where it was before. And at least you're going to have fans from every team there. It might not be like for like Birmingham, that will be loaded. New Orleans, it won't be as much, but they will be there. So I think it's good that they did this. It's definitely better than the first season, but I hope they eventually go to the XFL where they all have their own locations. But this is better.
So, I mean, since you brought up expansion, we can talk expansion. Do you see a point where we get to something that resembles like 1985 USFL, where you have Birmingham Stallions, New Jersey Generals, Memphis Showboats, Baltimore Stars, Tampa Bay Bandits, Jacksonville Bulls, Orlando Renegades, Oakland Invaders, Denver Gold, Houston Gamblers, Arizona Outlaws, Portland Breakers, San Antonio Gunslingers, and the LA Express. Obviously, Baltimore is now Philly, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, and didn't you say what was Portland's last name?
Portland Breakers. That's
which
obviously
is now New Orleans.
Yeah.
That's they've reused the names for different locations on several, like you pointed out. I could see it. I could see them expanding. Like I said, if they expand, it's going to be interesting to see if they still do the hub system or if they go to every team having their own, stadium. That will be interesting. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely going to have to be – they're going to have to be able to have enough money to expand. That's the key. Because if they have enough money to expand, then I think expansion is good because people like leagues that have a lot of teams because you have a lot of different matchups. You have a lot of different fan bases. You'll be able to reach more of the country. I think that's where, like, the XFL has it right, having the West Coast teams this year with Seattle and Vegas. You don't have that with the USFL. There's no team west of Texas. But, for, again, people like us, we'll watch anything, that's football related, even if it's, teams that aren't near our area or if it's football in general. But some people want to watch teams that are close to them. So if you have expansion, then you'll be able to reach more fans because you'll have a team close to them. We kind of mentioned it with, someone having like a Nebraska team in Omaha, because you'd have like Nebraska fans that love Nebraska Cornhuskers football potentially showing up to a professional team in Omaha for the USFL or the XFL. It probably won't happen, but Omaha is a much bigger city than it used to be. And, it would have appeal. You would be able to draw those people. You could expand to, cities that haven't had a team before that, or it could work for a team.
Mm-hmm. So, for me, I agree with a lot of people that I've been listening to that talk about this. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about Michigan and Philly playing in Ford Field? Because I personally don't think that that's a good idea just because of the possible max capacity number is so big. And whereas, Birmingham and New Orleans are playing where they played the entire league played last year. Memphis and Houston are playing at the Liberty Bowl Stadium. Pittsburgh and New Jersey, like I stated, are playing at the Canton Hall of Fame Stadium. So, attendance in the other three, mostly Birmingham and Memphis, though, are not really an issue. Whereas, if you're playing in, like, I guess the big thing for me is the fact that they're playing in Detroit. They're playing in a big city. It's a small league to our point. And yes, people may show out, but when they show like the wide shot of people in the stands, is it going to have to be something where they close off the upper decks of Ford Field and just make it a lower bowl attendance thing?
Well, I mean, I agree with your point because, I mean, the home, field advantage is always better when, it's the whole stadium's full. Because if you have a lot of empty seats, it's going to, even if there's a lot of people there, it doesn't give as great of a home atmosphere. And it's not a good look on TV. So, I mean, to your point, I think that if you did close it off, the top, it would
Mm-hmm.
be the fans would be more centralized together, so the noise might be better, and it wouldn't be as bad of a look. Because I mean, you kind of saw that with Birmingham, especially with a lot of the teams that there weren't a lot of fans. They closed off sections. They were just trying to centralize it. It just still didn't work if no one was there. I mean, some of those games, no one was there. And it is what it is. I mean, again, you're not going to get
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh and Philly fans to show up in Birmingham, and it's not happening. But I mean, I think that, to your point, this league works better when you're playing in smaller stadiums because of the fact that you're not going to have as many fans, and the noise will be more, centralized. It'd be lower, and it works better than if you have a big, massive stadium, like you said, like Ford Field. That just don't work. I mean, they're probably going to have to close off the top if they want to make the crowd noise better, being lower. But it'll be interesting to see how many people show up. I mean, if they show out, then maybe it could be worth it. But to your point, I don't think they're going to be able to fill that. So it'll be interesting to see what they do for sure.
Yes, I mean, the other thing too is, what are your thoughts of having the postseason at the entire postseason at one location? Because wasn't the semifinals and the championship last year in Canton at the Hall of Fame Stadium? Which, I mean, yes, benefits someone like me who wants to go see this league in person, but
Yeah.
doesn't really help with numbers for the teams themselves. I mean, yes, the league didn't necessarily do itself any favors that first year because it was all in one location. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, this may help the numbers enough to where we do see in season 3,
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe a little expansion, like an addition of 2 to 4 teams, and all the teams get their own locations. I think
Yeah.
that's what the USFL is building towards for next year.
Yeah, they need that. Every team needs to have their own place. That's what, like I said, to reiterate what you just said. I said it earlier as well. I agree with that. I mean, you have to have every team have their own location. That just makes the most sense. Now, for like a semifinal or quarterfinal, if you have more teams, I think that you could have the game with the higher seed at their place. So if you have
Mm-hmm.
like a Birmingham's the 1 seed and you're playing, 4 seed New Orleans in a semifinal game, then I think that the game should be at Birmingham if they all had their own location. Just as a example, and then the championship game could be in a place like Canton if they wanted it to be. That would make more sense to do like that, kind of like how the NFL does, where the higher seed gets their, to play at their place. I think that the USFL and the XFL could do that.
Mm-hmm. Um, so, because I guess expansion kind of intrigues me, especially with this one.
Mm-hmm.
But how far of expansion, as far as like number of teams, do you think it would take before we get an expansion on the playoffs?
You'd probably have to have at least 12 teams, but 16 for sure. If you had 16 teams, you'd have to expand the playoffs. 12 is possible that they could go to more matchups, but with 16, you'd have to have extra games. too many teams,
Right,
too many teams worthy of it, and you'd have more matchups at a quarter
and
mile.
I mean, and I mean, like, you know, for example, the CFL has a number of teams that they have, and yet like 6 teams make the playoffs. So, I mean, to your point, you know, for that league being as small as it is, for example, at like I think 12 teams, and having the, you know, best team in the West, best team in the East, with one quarterfinal game between the number 2 and number 3 best in each division, then playing in the semifinal games, it works. And the other thing is, if you go to 12, do you, let's say, for example, even though neither of us want to see it happen, let's say, for example, the XFL falls apart somehow. Do we see the USFL basically take over with the CFL and have a season as long as the CFL does? Because the CFL regular season is like 19 or 20 games long. Do we see that eventually happen? Obviously, you know, USFL wouldn't jump to that kind of thing immediately, but
yeah, to your point about that, I mean, you could make the season longer if you have more teams, because you could have more matchups that are not repeated. Because I mean, like with these 2 leagues here with 8 teams, you can't, you know, have a 20, you know, game schedule or something like that with 8 teams. You'd be playing the same teams like 3 or 4 times. It's just not really feasible. But with more teams, you could. So I agree with you. I think if you have 16 teams in a league, whether it's the XFL or the USFL, you could go longer. I mean, for sure. You wouldn't have as many repeated matchups. And I mean, I think that having the season longer would only make sense if one of these leagues makes it, because of the fact, and one don't, because as it currently stands, you're technically, if you're someone that looks at both of these leagues as basically the same thing, then you've got 20 weeks of this. 10 with the XFL and 10 with the USFL. So that's essentially 20 weeks of, you know, football with alternative spring leagues, you know, or whatever you want to call them, that are, you know, for players that aren't in the NFL. But if one of these 2 folds and there's only one left, that's where it maybe would make more sense to have, you know, like either the one league and take the other teams from the other league, or just add teams yourself and go to like a 20 game schedule, you know, or even 15 or 16. It doesn't have to be 20, but like 15 or 16 games or something like that, because of the fact that the other league's gone. Because right now you have 20 weeks of football with these 2 leagues. So essentially there's your expansion, you know, of your schedule, is now the XFL exists again, and these 2 leagues are going 10 weeks apiece. So it would make more sense for one of the, if one of the leagues is going to have that long of a schedule, for the other to not be there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I mean, like, for example, as to why like the CFL is so long, your only competition at the time is arena football. And how often do they really televise arena football? It's usually
not very often,
like one big time game a week, and almost every playoff game, especially the Arena Bowl.
Plus the CFL, if you look at it from, you know, where it's located, I mean, Canadian people are only going to watch that.
Yeah.
I mean, we watch it too, but it's like there's other stuff on as well. I mean, we're watching NBA, you know, when it starts and stuff like that. And, you know, and some people watching baseball heavily that are baseball fans. I mean, there's more still competition with other sports. I mean, people that like football will turn on Canadian football. But in Canada, Canadian people are watching the CFL. they're probably not watching arena football. So there's not really any competition for Canada viewers.
Mm-hmm.
Down here, there's more competition for sure.
For sure. Well, I mean, it'll definitely be interesting with both leagues. We're obviously excited for the football starting this weekend. Go Defenders, go Battlehawks, and go Roughnecks, even though I think I took Orlando to beat the Roughnecks. But, just stay tuned right here to Unscripted with Mike and Jeffrey, and because we'll be here to cover the entire thing. Topics may not be as long as they were today, but I wanted us to get an in-depth look at everything and make sure that we get all of our complete opinions out there. But everyone stay tuned to the channel. Please comment, like, and subscribe to both of us. And we will definitely see you next week for Unscripted for sure. And stay tuned. If you want to watch us overall, we'll be on Young Guns the rest of the week. So we'll see you next time. Everyone have a great day, and stay healthy, stay safe, stay warm, and go football.
Thanks for being everybody. Can't wait for the XFL, man.